to destabilize the process, masterminded vote buying that has heightened misgivings from the various contending interests in the two respective states.
Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has promised free and fair elections and says it has taken steps that include deployment of operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, as well as the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, deploy those personnel to polling centers to arrest vote buyers. Now, this is in addition to committing the candidates to sign a peace accord for non-violent elections.
Now, the peace accord was signed in the presence of the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mohammed Yakub, and of course the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, to abide by the electoral process in deepening the nation's democratic culture.
But what are the final touches being put in place by INEC for credible elections in both states this weekend? And how best to address issues of violence in the elections, especially with some flashpoints already identified? And more importantly, what are other issues of concern in both states this weekend? Answers to those questions and more on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria will come in our conversation segment. And it's on that note we welcome you to the program. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirin Umayo. Now, just to remind you that Good Morning Nigeria is broadcast live on the network service of the NTA, Africa's largest TV network. And as usual, we have the complementary segments of the program, including newspaper review, business, and others. For now, let's join Musbao Dan Wahab for the morning news. Hello, Musbao.
It's a very good morning, Kirian. Let's take the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has met with the management of Pearson Education Group in London. A statement by Bashir Ahmed, personal assistant to the president on new media, says President Buhari was joined at a meeting by Nigeria's Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, Executive Secretary of the NUC, Professor Abubakar Rashid, Nigeria High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Justice Adesola Oguntunde was also in attendance. Now, Nigeria is now classified by the World Bank as a middle-class income country, just as the country's capital share values in the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development rises to over $50 million. Also, Nigeria has joined 188 other countries that have signed the International Convention Against Doping in Sports as the Federal Executive Council approves a draft bill to be sent to the National Assembly for the domestication of the law against doping in sports.
Approve for the draft bill today to be sent to the National Assembly. One of the major advantages is that it confers more recognition and more honor, more recognition for Nigeria in the sports industry.
Under the current federal system in Nigeria, some capital projects fall under the purview of the federal government. However, there are cases where a state carries out such projects on behalf of the federal government, and in such cases, the state is eventually refunded. Kogi State is one of such states being owed by the federal government, and the Senate at Wednesday's plenary approved a refund of over 10 billion naira to the state.
That the state government has completed all the projects which it is seeking for a refund. That the state government has paid all contractors that executed the highway projects.
Because it is for the people of Kogi State. We have done justice to others, and we have to do justice to Kogi State. It doesn't matter when this justice is coming. This justice has to be done.
The flaws in existing tax laws in Nigeria are numerous and of concern to stakeholders. Such laws deny government access to revenue on one hand and result into double taxation on corporate entities on the other. The House of Representatives at Wednesday's plenary moved a step forward to correct these flaws as it passed for second reading a bill for an act to amend the Companies Income Tax Act.
If you move to Dubai, for instance, those who are very much in the habit of going for holidays. They pay those taxes there, and they are happy to see the infrastructure development in that country. When they come back here, the first thing to do is to criticize the government that we are not doing, it's not happening. How now do we finance our budget?
A lot of international investors complain about the challenges in investment, particularly those old policies that encumber the processes of coming into the economy and getting things done, as speedily as possible. So this act seeks to review the existing laws to ensure that the processes are easier and faster.
Now to some judicial matters. The Supreme Court will tomorrow give reasons for why it held that the appeal by Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, was without merit. The court had on October 30 dismissed the appeal by Atiku and his party against the decision of the Presidential Election Petition Court that upheld second-term election of President Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, APC. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad, who led the panel that held the appeal, had on October 30, while giving a summary of the court judgment, said the Supreme Court will provide reasons for its decision on a later date. For 40 years now, Nigeria has said to have slept on their rights in the lack of enforcement of Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which provides for the social and economic rights of our people. Now, legal and political experts have called on the people and all the three arms of government to ensure the enforcement of that chapter of the Constitution.
Chapter 2 provisions remain viable instruments for the fight against corruption. That was how they retained the ICPC. So many people lampoon the Supreme Court and all that, but that has become the law.
I think the time has come, and that is the advocacy we are leading. And we believe that the government of the day, both executive, judicial, and legislative arms, should come together in a consortium and try to breathe life and vitality to Chapter 2 of the Constitution.
In order to make the next-level agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari more realizable across sections of the people of Oyo State, are advocating complementary roles by state governments in provision of democracy dividends and development of your state.
It's just to try as much as they can to utilize the much they are getting.
It's a good project in this day, and we monitor this project. We are not looking at the mega resources, we are looking at the heart. We are looking at the proper management of these resources. It's about utilizing this money to deliver democracy dividend.
That's the news highlight for this morning, and Good Morning Nigeria. More will come in our subsequent bulletins. Let's take a break now. Kingsley and Kieran will be back.
The new edition of TV Guide is out, exclusively taking a look at the traditional television and new media. Are they comparable or complementary? Media industry players give perspective on the trends, progress, challenges, and the way forward. Find out on this compelling edition of TV Guide. Expository interviews with stars of the team within our space. Becky Madojemo of NTA, Utibe Umore of AIT, Nifemi Oguntai of TVC, and a host of others. TV Guide, your indispensable companion. Also feature Yamadina. A TV drama series on NTA. Let's get to meet the characters behind Iyamodina. This edition also presents exciting features on tourism, culture, entertainment, sports, health, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendors near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Like a building, democracy has its essential part, security and peace form the core foundations of any prosperous democratic society. Insecurity deprives a society of the much-needed stability for anything tangible to be achieved. In Kogi State today, there has been peace and stability in the past 3.5 years. This didn't happen by accident. One man, Governor Yahaya Bello, understands the need for peace as an essential ingredient for development. The issue of resolving insecurity in the land tops his table of preference. He provided security agencies with numerous patrol vehicles. Kidnappers' dens have been destroyed. Gangs of robbers have been arrested and prosecuted. Criminals are denied access to land. Kogi State has become one of the most peaceful states in the Nigerian Federation. He needs our support for further development on the solid foundation being laid. Think GYB, a rational choice.
Helpline Foundation Nigeria and Partners presents the 3rd Annual African Women Conference AWC 2019, a gathering of experts, institutions, corporate organizations, and individuals promoting the growth, stability, and development of African women, through which various resources available to African women can be channeled towards the sustainable development of the continent.
Keynote speakers: Dame Paul Talent, Ramatu Tijani Aliu, Madam Magdala Cooper, Binta Masigarba, Karima Ranim, Ibtisame Azao, Dr. Anissa Nagra, veteran Nollywood actors and actresses.
Theme: Building a Coalition to End Gender Inequality in Africa. Date: 21st to 23rd November 2019. Venue: Kenzi Manara Palace, Marrakesh, Morocco. For participation and inquiries, visit www.africa-womenconference.org or call +234 806 5388424. AWC builds an Africa where every woman's potential is fully harnessed. Powered by Helpline Foundation Nigeria, Echoes Africa Initiatives New York, International Center for Diplomacy in Morocco.
This year, like every old year for over a decade, we celebrate and reward African creatives around the world at the African Academy Awards ZAFA 2019 in Abuja, Nigeria. The second homecoming event is a 3-day gathering of industry stakeholders and enthusiasts to network as well as encourage and motivate budding talents. Screenings, exhibitions, and master classes will hold at the Silverbed Galleria on the 22nd to 23rd November 2019. The awards and gala night on the 24th of November 2019 at the prestigious Hilton Hotel Abuja. For inquiries and sponsorship, advert placements, and tickets, call the following numbers on your screen now or visit www.zafa.org.
This is wonderful. I'm super excited about it. Nothing is expected of them other than awesomeness.
ZAFA 2019. Come expecting the unexpected.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures. Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down. Do you have a job where you're going to? No, but someone is arranging, Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad or even end up in prison.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, going business now. Making Nigeria global again via internationally decent and approved practices in public and private businesses is of the essence if attainment of sustainable ease of doing business is achieved. Details with Kolo Mohammed on Business News.
Making Nigeria global again requires ample contributions from different sectors of the economy. The environment for these needs to be put in place at the national level. This may include, but not limited to, firm land border reforms.
The border closure, I have repeatedly said, is a very good omen. Entirely commendable for this administration to have gotten the lever to do that. What it has done is to shoot up the pedigree of the respect that Nigeria has in the Community of Nations. That's number one. Because nobody ever thought that Nigeria could stand up to this. Number two, what it has also done is to revive ECOWAS, kickstart ECOWAS again, re-engineer ECOWAS towards taking a second look at the regional trade.
Remember, the government said they didn't close the borders against ECOWAS countries. They closed our borders against smuggling. It's important we're able to understand this. They closed the borders against, the inflow of, what you might be able to call people who are now coming to create some security challenges, for us. They closed our borders against those who are now using, the openness of those borders to be able to now perpetrate what you might be able to call economic calamities.
Time now to let you see where midweek activities on the floor of the Nigerian stock market placed market indices. That's business news at this time. I am Kolo Muhammad.
Thank you, Kolo Muhammad, for the business packet. Next is Newspaper Review.
Bayelsa, our newspaper reviewer, has just joined us. Very good morning.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning. Good morning, Kesley. Right, good morning, Nigeria.
Okay.
All right, let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper. The headlines from Blueprint newspaper, just on the right-hand side of the nameplate, we have a 650 billion naira released for 2019 capital budget, says the federal government. The story can be found on page 34. And directly below the nameplate, we have how Mena Son is scheming to delay 2.1 billion naira fraud trial. And following that is that story is actually on page 6. Now, NNPC stakeholders move to curb tanker fires. It's also on page 34. Gunmen kill 3 policemen in Kaduna local government. It's on page 5. And of course, the lead story this morning on the Blueprint newspaper. APC governors move against Oshomole, convene NEC meeting now, or that's the story you can find on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. And below the photo story on the Blueprint newspaper, we have some other headlines there. Pensioners will enjoy 30,000 naira new minimum wage, says NUP president. The story is on page 6. And now, Kogi poll, collation officers will come from outside the state, says INEC. It's on page 5. Why we are interested in Bayelsa poll, that's by US, it's on page 5. Now, 11th anniversary, Dana Air rewards passengers with gifts. That story is on page 37. Now, death penalty for hate speech. The Cybercrime Act, federal government tells Senate. It's on page 7.
All right. The Daily Sun newspaper, the lead story is on the hate speech. It's on the hate speech development, which is a bill being considered by the Senate. Federal government disowns Senate on hate speech penalty. With the rider upper chamber may backtrack on bill. Details of that story can be found on page 6. Now, an earpiece beside the nameplate of the Daily Sun newspaper says Oshomole and Obaseki's fight gets messier with 2 riders. Faction suspends governor, deputy, and others. APC governors ask national chairman to convene emergency NEC meeting or resign. Details on pages 6 and 10. And then other headlines there, opposition kicks as Senate approves 10.069 billion naira for Kogi. That's page 7. Gunmen kill 3 policemen in Kaduna as Plateau community buries 3 vigilantes allegedly killed by military. Details inside. And on page 8, reps direct JAMB to suspend proposed use of NIN. NIN stands for the National Identification Number for UTMA. That's the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination taking place next year. Details on page 8. Supreme Court to explain ruling on Buhari versus Atiku tomorrow. That's page 11. To the United Kingdom, as well as Executive Secretary of the NUC, after a meeting with the management of Pearson Educational Group in London yesterday. Bye.
Thank you. Let's start with the activities at the Senate, particularly concerning the bill on hate speech. And the spokesperson for the Senate, Godia Kwashiki, has said that the hate speech bill will be killed at second reading if it will bring hardship and crisis on Nigerians. She explained that the bill has a process to go through, and as it first mentioned, by the time it comes to the second mention and at the second reading, it will be subjected to debate, and if it is deemed not to be in the interest of Nigerians, it will be killed there. However, it may be recalled that the bill that is currently titled as Internet Falsehood and Manipulation Bill had a forerunner that was proposed at the same Senate in 2015. At that time, it was Senator Ibn Na'Allah who proposed it. At that point in time, the bill he conceived was against frivolous petition on social media and conventional media. It had required that before a petition is submitted, the petitioner ought to have gone to swear to an affidavit to ascertain that the information he's petitioning about is true. Otherwise, that person could be held accountable. On the issue of the budget, the Minister of National Finance, Budget and National Planning has lauded the National Assembly for the bold initiative to conclude the 2020 budget before the end of November. It may be recalled that the budget was laid before the National Assembly on 14th of October, and the Minister, after Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday, briefed that so far 650 billion of capital budget has been released for the 2019 budget. By December, another 250 billion is expected to be released, which will have brought the total to 900 billion. Don't forget that with the passage of the 2019 bill, middle of the year last year, it has a lifespan that should scale up across to May or June. But if the 2020 budget is to return to January, December cycle, it means that they will be running concurrently. And I don't know what they will do within the budget cycle to see that some of the items that have not been carried out will be fused into the 2020 budget. But she also gave indication that there are challenges in the sense that revenue targets are not being met, but the government is making bold initiatives. She indicated that a number of Sukuk bonds have been issued targeted at supporting the road construction progress. Also, there is what has been described as the bill, executive bill signed by Mr. President, which enables the private sector to also come in to contribute to the road construction. And that is going a long way to help the infrastructure program of the federal government administration. I say specifically that in spite of the returns of revenue, whenever funds are to be released, the highest priority are always given to the projects in Ministry of Power, Transportation, Works and Housing, and that will continue to be the priority. On the subject of national identity number, the House of Representatives have directed the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board to suspend the use of NIN for registration for UTME for next year. The House mandated its Committee on Tertiary Education as well as the National Identity Management Committee to meet and identify the challenges that will entail. The Honorable Member Zainab Gimba, who raised the issue, pointed out that already students, particularly in the rural areas, are facing challenges when they register for JAM. To come and add the NIN requirement will be adding some more problems to already difficult situation.
All right. Well, the issue of death penalty for hate speech, which has been in the air for a while now. Many Nigerians are also wondering why the issue of kidnapping was not also brought to the table with respect to the deliberations at the Senate now concerning hate speech.
I think we had cause to discuss this about 2 days ago on this program when this issue came up, Kingsley.
Yes.
And we pointed out the fact that, yes, it looks too extreme to prescribe death penalty for hate speech. But if you look at it on the other side, remember what happened in Rwanda? It was an orchestration of persistent hate speech that led to the situation that led to 900 persons being killed in what the whole world was all against. But that law certainly seems too severe, but the National Assembly, in its wisdom, says that they will bring everything that is required to bear to ensure that if it is required, it will be passed. If it is not required, it will be thrown out. But the other concern for all of us is that the anxieties 2 days to election in Kogi and Bayelsa is becoming a reality. As yesterday, there were violence in the PDP campaign in Lembe. 5 persons are reported to have been killed. One of them, a driver for an outside broadcast van. 2 policemen were reported to be among those killed and 2 other civilians. It was said that gunmen invaded the campaign of People's. They are at each other's neck. The People's Democratic Party is saying that its campaign was invaded by thugs of opponents. And the All Progressive Congress is saying that this is skirmishes among supporters of the same party. But whatever the situation is, there is no need for people to be killed because of you want to come and serve. And more so in Bayelsa, where there is homogeneity in that state. All of them there belong to one same ethnic nationality. Why is this aggravated to that step? You will recall that during the peace initiative that was made before by INEC and the Nigerian police, a traditional ruler warned that politicians were amassing arms for the purposes of the election. So there's need to be up on that. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police has briefed that for the election coming up on Saturday, 31,041 police are to be deployed to Bayelsa. In Kogi State, 35,200 policemen are to be deployed. And you know, the challenge is that the police says that they are going to be everywhere, every nook and cranny to stop thugs from being imported into the country. Kogi State is a confluence of Niger and Benue. It is also a confluence of borders. It has borders with 10 states of the Federation. And therefore, infiltrations into the state has always been a matter. And that was why one time crime rate was very high in Kogi, because it is also bordered with a lot of forests. And therefore, the police will have a lot of work to do in manning those areas if we to have elections, peaceful elections in Kogi State.
Well, eventually, that happens to be our topic for discussion this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Perhaps when we get the program running proper, we'll be able to delve into the intricacies of elections in those 2 states. And historically speaking, you know, we've known the 2 states to be flashpoints, if you like, if you ask me, because there was a reason why the elections are delayed. It was because of inconclusiveness of previous elections that led to the fact that they don't have the elections within the election cycle, the normal election cycle.
Yes. Well, there were judicial decisions that led to that. But in terms of those states, including Rivers, although Rivers is not on the ballot this time. Bayelsa, in 2015, you saw what happened in the governorship elections before, during, and well after the elections. The guns were booming in the creeks. We have seen a prelude to that now, and we just hope that the gladiators will allow peace reign. In Kogi, it is not any different. We saw what happened at Kogi State University some days ago, and I think a few heads have also been cracked or broken in some other locations around the state. And in fact, part of the reason, I'm not saying it's a full reason, why you had Yaya Bello become governor was on account of the disruption of the elections in 2015.
Yes.
You know, the late Prince Abubakar Audu was already leading, but because there was disruption around the Dekina area, I believe, so voting there had to be cancelled, and then there had to be a repeat of of the voting in some of the polling units. But before that process could be finalized, President Abubakar passed on, and that came on. Kieran, I mean, it's a fairly frequent thing.
A few days ago, there was this alleged burning down of SDP's office
Secretariat
in Kogi State. So these are just the build-up to the election we are hoping to, report on Saturday.
All right, it's a terrible thing. Then the issue of, if Bayo, you recall, the JAMB, that's the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, has said that as part of its efforts to deal with instances of impersonation and the hiring of mercenaries for purposes of writing the UTME, it was going to insist on NIN, that's the National Identification Number. We had made some suggestions as to what could be done, namely let the NIN, NIMC officials go to the schools or a cluster of schools and register the senior secondary school from 3 students, SS3 students who will be writing the JAMB, and therefore minimize the cost and time that they would spend. But the House of Reps now is saying, well, there are rural areas and you need to have a coverage of about 80% of the population before you start insisting on the national identification number. Well, JAMB did say that it wasn't the national identification card per se, because there's some delay between when you are registered, when you are registered and given a temporary slip, and then when you get the national ID card itself. But it is the NIN, that is the number, which means that you have first to be registered. But is NIMC ready for that, so that you don't get into a situation where persons are excluded? I mean, the process of registration will begin for JAMB, I think, sometime next month, which is December.
It means that people may start feeling JAMB right from the point of registration. I will suggest that JAMB should up its ante with respect to technology, because this is what technology can solve. There are
satellite technology.
No. There are specific softwares designed for identification. It's used at airports and across the globe. So they have to up their game in terms of technology. That is the only possible way, because of course population is growing. There are more students who are at the moment. So exclusion will come in from registration.
By the way, I was just wondering, sorry, Bayer, I'm sorry to jump in here. I was just wondering, isn't there an age limit for persons to be registered under DMC and therefore for you to have a national identity
And that
card?
was what the Honorable
because it's different.
Zainab pointed out.
Yes, it's different. Sorry, it's different from your birth certificate.
Exactly.
But for you to have, let's say a social security number. I mean, if you are a 10-year-old, doesn't mean that you have access to a social security number.
Exactly.
It's some jurisdiction. So I'm not quite sure what the law is now, or what the provision is in the statute with regard to the age you must attain before you get. It's like say, look, have a voter's card before you can write JAMB. If you're not 18, then there's no way you can do that. 15, 16 years old.
Honorable Zainab pointed out at the floor of the House that until now, you could not be registered by the National Identity Management Council unless you are at age 18.
That's right.
It's of recent that they are trying to now say, okay, they'll open the door across for people of the lower age, for everybody to register. And you know the process. You register for National Identity Management Commission with them. It takes about a year, 2 or 3, before eventually you get your identity card. There are several up to today that have not been able to get their ID, in spite of the fact that they have got text messages to them to go that their card is ready. They'll go there and it is not available.
That's right. Okay, well, Bayo, that's fine. The one on hate speech, you recall we also discussed it. The provision in the bill is an overkill. And as has been suggested, perhaps, I mean, this is not, we hope it's not a waste of time, by the distinguished senators in considering a bill with such manifestly punitive provisions.
If nothing, I think it has drawn attention to the concern about hate speech and fake news, the consequence it's likely to have. But certainly it does not require some of those draconian measures that are being put in place by law. Naturally, the role of the National Assembly is to provide laws to take care of challenges in the society. fake news and hate speech is becoming a challenge.
They are more concerned about kidnapping. What have they done about kidnapping? Or is it just hate speech? Yes, but kidnapping is more dangerous. It's more affecting society more and across the nation. So why can't that, action be taken on that?
No, Kieran, there are state laws already on kidnapping. I mean, just yesterday, 3 persons were sentenced to death by hanging in Lagos State for kidnapping.
Let it be national. Yes. Let it not be state by state.
There are laws against kidnapping. And some states have gone to the extent, for instance, Lagos State had amended its kidnapping law that if you kidnap an individual and in the process a person dies, all those who are involved in the kidnapping, if they are prosecuted and found guilty, is death penalty. So it depends upon.
Delta also has that, I believe. And,
yes.
And if in addition, of course, to the confiscation of the property of those kidnappers. Bayo Tebe, we'd like to thank you for being around.
Thank you.
See you again tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with our item for discussion.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Ignited smiles across Africa and beyond. As Gogi Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnership with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Lagos State Government, Canon, Delta Airlines, Royal Caribbean, Tour Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogiafrica.tv. Gogi Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Yes, still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and our focus this morning is on the forthcoming elections in Kogi and of course Bayelsa states. And to set the tone for the conversation this morning, let's take a look at this background report put together by Kule Ade.
Bayelsa and Kogi are among states that have off-season governorship elections in the country. Political activities are in earnest in the 2 states, especially with campaigns in winning the votes of the electorate. The Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) had at different fora maintained its neutrality in the forthcoming elections in Kogi and Bayelsa states. It strongly holds that credible elections can only be guaranteed when the relevant bodies abide by the electoral rules. Event watchers have observed some level of improvement in the conduct of elections in the country, which they believe can be better if electoral practices such as violence, vote buying, and godfatherism are addressed. With election in barely 2 days' time, concerns are high on the issue of security during elections. The Nigeria police, charged with the responsibility of providing security, has assured the electorate safety during and after the elections. 24 political parties have been cleared by the electoral umpire for the Kogi governorship election, while 45 political parties will contest the governorship election in Bayelsa State. Already, local and international observers are in the state to assess the level of compliance with the electoral guidelines by INEC. But how well do the political gladiators in Kogi and Bayelsa abide by signed peace accord for peaceful elections? What sanctions for breach of the contract? Answers are more with guests on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, joining us in the studio now to discuss the weekend elections, we have Oluwole Osaze-Ozie, who is Director of Publicity and Voter Education of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Mr. Ewole, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios is Deputy Commissioner of Police, Frank Umba, who is the First Public Relations Officer. DCP, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
And still in Abuja, we have Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, who is a political scientist and also a regular feature on Good Morning Nigeria. We're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, let's begin with INEC, that's the Director of Voter Education and Publicity, Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Ozie. Just barely 48 hours, Kogi and Bayelsa will be having their off-cycle governorship elections. Are you good to go?
The straightforward and simple answer to that is yes, we are prepared, but we have to give a breakdown as to our preparations in the sense that we are all non-sensitive materials had since arrived. Pardon me, since arrived the two states. But as at yesterday, this distribution of sensitive materials commenced. Logistics is a big thing, and we're looking very closely at that. And the what we call the rack centers, so the staging posts from which we will deploy to the polling units have been activated. Recall that previously we will go to the from central bank to the state office to the local government office, but now it's going to go to local government straight to the rack centers, so that by tomorrow all the personnel and materials will be at the rack centers for deployment. Some rack centers actually contain several polling units, so those will be quite easy, straightforward. But those that are 10, 15, 20 minutes walk or drives will also be mobilized first, and then we'll leave those ones closest to the rack centers for data distribution. Then, of course, security. We've had several meetings with the security agencies to ensure that people are assured that there will be security and there will be a larger turnout, because obviously if security issues are not settled in people's minds, they'll be hesitant to come out. Recruitment training have long been concluded. You carried several reports of training issues, and the reports in your newspaper review, for example, stakeholders were told that we will bring coalition officers, returning officers from outside of the states for obvious reasons. So both states were ready to go. Whether the politics are ready is another issue entirely. They also have assured us that they are ready. Smart card readers have been reconfigured, charged, and basically, INEC is set to go.
All right, Mr. Uzi, preparedness is one thing. Another is to be able to execute the project sufficiently well. Yes. Considering Bayelsa, for instance, there are areas that have a difficult terrain, that may take time to even get to the polling units in those areas. And how prepared, again, is INEC to ensure that those difficult terrains are taken care of? There are also some in Kogi as well.
Yeah, indeed.
Is there any extra effort to ensure that those areas are going to be captured without having issues?
Well, I don't know whether I am right to say that we're a bit familiar with those terrain, and we've had several meetings with our officers. We have officers in every local government area of both of the whole country, but specifically about both states, and we have wards, regional areas in those days. And the electoral officers have been instructed. They've been to all the wards and almost all communities within their jurisdiction. So they're very familiar. They brought us reports, and specific initiatives have been introduced. For some places, flooding is an issue. Even though they have riverine terrains, it's complicated by the high tides and the flooding in some areas. So all those issues have really been addressed. And the officials who are going to conduct these elections, because those are the ones on ground who are going to conduct the elections, have specific initiatives to address particular or peculiar challenges in each of their communities. You're right, so Kogi has riverine terrain. People forget it's a confluence state, and it has some mountainous terrains as well. So all those things have been factored into our planning, and we hope that the implementation will be in accordance with the plans, will be executed in accordance with the plans.
Okay, right, thanks. So we'll come back to you shortly. Let's bring in now the Deputy Commissioner of Police and Force Public Relations Officer, Frank Umba. There are genuine concerns about security in the lead up to the elections in both states on account of the high stakes you're having amongst the leading contenders for the positions of governor in the two states. What is the situation report, and what has been done to put any flare-up under control?
Let me acknowledge the fact that indeed the elections in both Kogi and Bayelsa State, from the security threat analysis we've conducted, certainly will require the best of our performances. But the good thing here is the fact that we're able to, ahead of time, carry out a detailed security threat analysis, and we're able to see and we can project very clearly what are the likely scenarios in both Bayelsa and Kogi states. And beyond what people are saying, we have also been able to geolocate some of the areas we considered as trouble spots. We've also been able to identify groups and persons and clearly marked them, more like visual marking, and place them under very strict surveillance. These are persons and groups that we have analyzed their antecedents, we have analyzed their characters, their spoken words, and then we see them as likely persons that could be involved in some forms of thuggery or violence, and we have clearly marked them. And as the build up to the elections continue, we won't hesitate if we don't see reasonable changes to isolate and deal decisively with some of those elements that we have identified. But as it stands now, our monitoring is our level of monitoring is being intensified, and it is also important for Nigerians to know that we already have men on ground. As a matter of fact, for over a month now, we have intelligence operative. We have done covert deployments in those two states, and we have a steady stream of intelligence report being pushed out to force headquarters, and it is on the basis of this intelligence that the entire deployment strategy are built upon. So our deployment strategy will be intelligence driven, they will be purposeful, they will be target oriented, and at the end of the day, our target is to ensure that we're able to provide a safe and secured environment for INEC to deliver on this mandate, a safe and secure environment for the politicians to be able to politic, and at the end of the day stand for those elections in a free and fair manner, a safe and secure environment for even the electors to be able to come out, cast their votes, and return home without any threats to their persons, threats to their property. And once we're able to do that, we'll certainly will be delivering on our mandate. And again, Nigerians must also not forget that we have a very we also have a history of policing the electoral processes in this country. We understand the dynamics, we understand the antics of the average Nigerian politicians, we understand some of those ploys and tricks and strategies that they deploy. We police the same generation of police officers that have policed elections severally, including the last general election. And if we could police the election that took place in all parts of the country, and we did that successfully, we have the competency and the capacity to be able to police an election in just 2 isolated states. We understand the challenges, we understand the concerns of people, but I'm here to reassure Nigerians that we will deliver on our mandate. Not only will we deliver, we will also be very professional, we will be politically neutral, and we will provide a level playing field for all the political actors.
Yes, well spoken. And what's of interest is actually the fact that he said we have done the geolocation of persons or groups, intelligence report. Reports have said, look, these are people to watch. That's clearly stated by you. Now, the build-up, to this election, we have seen some skirmishes here and there. And, the major parties, blaming each other for one thing or the other. But we will return to you for further analysis on this, because your men on ground on that day are really going to be the people to execute all the beautiful plans that I have put in place. For now, let's go to Abu Hamisu, a political scientist. Now, you have been watching or listening to news or reports from both states, in the build-up to this election. What's your assessment?
Well, I was thinking with the investment both the federal government and donors have made into enlightening people about electoral violence, we see the trend really decreasing. But again, we're like back to square one, as if nothing has changed and nobody has learned any lessons in terms of thuggery in violence election. The purpose of election is for people to make their choices without compulsion. And in doing that, the candidate as well as the political parties ought to woo people by using persuasion programs and what they intend to do once they take over government. That is why democracy is loved all over the world. It doesn't require violence to change anybody from office. It doesn't require anybody to die before you can cast your ballot. But again, as usual, the stakes are high, and the politicians know how to play their games because they don't want to lose out of power. So those that want to take over are mobilizing. Those that are governing are equally mobilizing not to lose their seat. So you have a situation where two opposing forces are preparing for like war. But election is not war. Election is about whatever the process is, peaceful conduct that will produce a peaceful outcome that will be acceptable to everybody. But the pre-election preparations, INEC has stated what they want to do, the police has stated what they want to do. But again, the politicians are out there mobilizing their people not to canvass for election, electoral victory in a peaceful manner, but threatening others that do not believe in their cause, which is really anathema to democracy, as well as a peaceful election that we crave for. So another thing again is Frank Mba has said a lot of things in terms of preparation, but there is one thing that has not been happening. Mostly, at the end of it all, those people that perpetrated mayhem pre-election and even election day, sometimes you only heard of the arrest if arrests are made. But again, at the end of it all, we are back to square one. To the extent that before now, you could hear garrison commander in a certain location in Nigeria. So once there's election, is the Mr. Fix It. And how is he fixing the election? We all know how they do it. You mobilize young people. Thank God federal government is trying now to ban those substances. Some of them has already been banned. You give young guys that are unemployed tramadol, guns, and then you unleash mayhem against the system, against the security forces, and you write a result and you declare. They have this saying that instead of you to be rigged out, it is better you rig your opponent, and instead of you to be rigged out and you go to court, it is better that they are taking you to court. Because the belief before now is that once you go to the court, you can sort yourself out in the court. So it all depends on how best you can mobilize your lawyer with the resources you have at your disposal, and then before you know it, from say tribunal to either appeal court, or from appeal court to Supreme Court, and that ends it, and we go back to the same cycle again. We want to see improvement because the weakest link in terms of election preparation and delivery in this country has always been the politicians and the youth. So INEC will come back to the drawing board to do their analysis. And I remember when INEC came up with this very particular noble policy that whatever ward where there is electoral violence, that ward is automatically cancelled. So what politicians resorted to doing is to locate the wards where their opponent had the greatest strength, and they go there and ensure that there is violence, so that INEC will cancel those units for them to be able to increase their chances. So as INEC is trying to improve the system, the politicians are equally working to undermine the system. Now you talk about security strategy. By the time you do all your security strategy, fine and good. As you are strategizing, they are equally strategizing. So the only thing that can really civilize politicians is when by the time they work against the system, they realize that they will remain in jail for 10 years. So that 2 election cycles will pass them by, and then they will not be around to enjoy their misbehavior.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Abu Hamis. So let's return to the INEC director in charge of voter education and publicity. There have been reports with regard to litigation. Kogi, on the one hand, and then Bayelsa just a few days ago. What is the state of litigation with regard to the 2 governorship elections, and what are the issues, and what is the likely impact of the decisions reached so far?
Your guess is as good as mine, Kingsley. This is one of the challenges being faced by the Electoral Commission as a management body. We acknowledge the rights of any aggrieved person, and it's the proper way to go about it. If you're aggrieved, you go to the judiciary. There's no problem about that, because of the division of it's not everything INEC does, not everything the party does that candidates or people agree with. There are two things in the litigation process. One is to deal with intra-party crisis. Some aspirants were not satisfied with the way the parties conducted their primaries. So being aggrieved, they took the proper course, they went to court. That's one. 2, you have a class of cases where certain people were not qualified. And because they were not qualified, they were not put on the ballot. So they felt aggrieved, and rightly so. They asked for judicial review of the administrative actions of the electoral management of INEC. So those are the second batch of cases. Then the third line of cases deals with the law requires us to display the affidavits sworn to by every candidate being sponsored by political parties. The essence of that, which the law says, is that, look, if you have any objections to the candidature of any person, either that the person is not qualified or he's disqualified, then please go to court, and not come to them, go to court, and the court, if satisfied that yes, he has lied under oath in a material particular, will stop the person from contesting an election, or if he has won the election, she has won the election, remove the person from whatever office the person. So those are the 3 line of cases: 1 against their parties, 2 against the commission, 3 against the candidates, any person. In the third one, any person at all. It can be a party, it can be anybody on the street. You don't have, it gives local standard, as you well know. It gives standing for everybody to sue. And that is the case of the APC in Bayelsa State. Then they have about 5 cases dealing with the issue of candidates not being qualified. To be qualified, there are 4 criteria. You must be a Nigerian, you must belong to a party, and sponsored by that party, you must be educated up to secondary school level, and then you must be of age. You must be a Nigerian by birth, then you must of age. So if someone doesn't meet that criteria, as far as we're concerned, it's a constitutional provision. The constitutional provisions are not self-executing. Somebody, administrative body, as we saw it, will have to look at it and say, look, on the face of the papers you have submitted, several of them obviously did not meet the age requirements of 35 years of age. And so we said, no, sorry, look at the constitution, you cannot be on the ballot. But we don't have a final say. If you are dissatisfied with that, then you can go to court. It's not a question of disqualification, it's a question of qualification. But disqualification is another different section in the constitution. And that deals with, for example, yes, you may be qualified, but you're of unsound mind, you're on discharge bankrupt, you have been found guilty of an offense involving dishonesty. All those things will disqualify you. You're otherwise qualified, but all those things will disqualify you. So it's a different section that deals with that under the Constitution. We have no power to disqualify, but we think we have power to look at your prima facie, look at your papers and say, are you qualified, so that we can put you on the ballot. But we had about 4 or 5 cases on that. 2 have gone one way, so that's why we have 25 parties in Kogi. It was 2 others by court order. But the courts in 3 other cases said, look, Inek, you're correct. There were 1 or 2 other parties, I forgot, there's a 4th criteria, 1 or 2 other parties who came later than the date stipulated for submission of their nomination forms. Those ones, of course, the courts have held that they are not qualified to be on the ballot because they don't come within the time stipulated by the law and stipulated by INEC. So those are the 4 categories of cases, and they have serious impact. The impact is this. Now, a judgment is coming up today, later this morning.
Which of the issues?
In Bayelsa. I don't recall that one, but I think it has to do with being on the ballot.
Okay.
I think it has to do with being on the ballot. So these are the challenges. A judgment came 2 days ago, and the judge said we should put 10 people on the ballot. Some other political parties lost their chance. So we have, as it were, conflicting decisions by the courts. There's nothing to guide us. So obviously, those cases we hope will go on appeal and resolve one way or the other. But whatever the court says, we comply with the order. So where the courts have asked us to put certain people on the ballot who we are not qualified. In those cases, for example, in some of those cases, the courts did not hold that the people were qualified. It held that INEC cannot look at these things and say, sorry, I can't put you on the ballot. That INEC is a conduit and should not clog the thing. Once the party just put anybody, even if it's a Chinese that is 13 years old and says, I want to be governor of the state, that INEC can just hold up its hands, and it doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound right to people, because other courts have said, no, that cannot be. Because the provisions of the Constitution are not self-executing, somebody has to have a first say as to whether you should be on the ballot or not. If that person, INEC, is wrong, then the court will come and say, INEC, you are wrong. So they clear people to contest, even if it's against the clear provisions of the Constitution. That's what it is.
I don't know. Well, still on this. So what is the clarity now? Because exclusion from the ballot is a serious issue for any candidate or his political party to ride on, and then get consequential orders if it is successful. So what is INEC? What is INEC doing? I know that you're still having some decisions later today. When I asked earlier, are you good to go? To a large extent, you said, of course, you are ready in terms of your administrative procedures. But here you are now with litigation. And so, can you isolate them? In Kogi, what are the issues that INEC is concerned about with regard to litigation? In Bayelsa, what are the issues that INEC is concerned about with regard to litigation?
Well, in Kogi, 2 parties that fielded candidates were not qualified have been put, or INEC has been directed to put them on the ballot, whether or whether not. And we will comply with the court orders, an extant court order, without prejudice to our rights, to INEC's rights as a group to appeal against those decisions. There is clarity now. Whichever one the court says, clarity in the sense that for those 2 parties, they're on the ballot. But that does not necessarily mean if either of those parties wins the election, because we'll exercise our rights of appeal. If we haven't studied the judgment and taken legal advice, we may exercise our rights of appeal. These are the complications going to come in now. And it doesn't stop now with election day. It may come in later. You saw what happened in Zamfara. INEC said, look, Zamfara APC, sorry, you did not conduct primaries, you did not comply with Section 7 of the Electoral Act, you cannot sponsor candidates. They said no. Again, on the eve of election, there were 2 conflicting judgments from 2 different high courts, a high court in Abuja, a high court in, I think, Zamfara itself there. So, what do? We said we have to comply. The last one, we complied and put them on the ballot. And the party cleared all the seats. But the appeal court said, no, this is not right. INEC was correct in the first place. It went all the way to Supreme Court. And Supreme Court vindicated the INEC position. So all those votes were decided to be wasted votes. So, and they held that INEC can look at it and say, if you do not comply, at first instance, it can say whether it should be on the ballot or should not be on the ballot. So that will happen. So in Bayelsa, there is a case now involving APC. Yesterday, we now finally got the orders of the court. We'll look at study orders. Hopefully, we'll get the full judgment and to see whether APC will be on the ballot or not. In Rivers, recall, APC was not on the ballot because of a court order. But that one came way ahead of time. But this is coming hours, literally hours.
What is the issue?
Well, the issue was that the deputy governorship candidate of the APC lied in a material particular on oath. He tendered sending certificates to INEC. We are satisfied that the man has the basic qualification to contest. He's qualified. But the courts have said there was a disqualifying factor. So if that is the case, then he ought not to be on the ballot. Now, the issue is this. If he's not on the ballot, can the party be allowed to substitute its deputy governorship candidate? A lot of people say no, it cannot because they're joint tickets. And whatever vice affects the governor, can affect the deputy governorship candidate and vice versa. So if the deputy governorship candidate is not qualified, then the governorship candidate is not also qualified. And so that party that sponsored the disqualified, and by the way, to sponsor a disqualified is a criminal offense because the Electoral Act puts a penalty. The party, you did not screen your candidate very well. You wasted everybody's time. There's a 500,000 naira fine if you're found, if the party is found guilty of sponsoring an unqualified candidate.
Now, is any form of litigation hindering election in Bayelsa with respect to what we just said, the deputy governor for APC? Yes. Is it going to affect the election in Bayelsa State?
No, we don't think it will affect the election in the sense that whether the election will go on or not. It will go on. But if we study the judgment and find out that, look, and we'll make a pronouncement in good time, today or tomorrow, we'll make a pronouncement on whether the APC has a candidate or not. We have to study the orders made by the court. So we will abide with the court order, but we have to study that and specifically what it says.
Okay. I just want to I don't know. I wanted us to bring in DCP Franco, but not as a police officer and not on the security. He's a lawyer also. And Abi Hamiso, of course, is a political scientist. This is a critical issue, Kyria. When you say that, look, the governorship and the deputy governorship is a joint ticket. That's the governorship candidate and the running mate is a joint ticket. What happens to one affects the other. Frank is here. We saw what happened in 2015 with regard to Yaya Bello. Because Yaya Bello had tapped his running mate, who was running mate to Prince Abubakar Audu, who was now saying that he should be the one that should step in after the demise of Yaya Bello. So Yaya Bello went into the concluding part of that election without that running mate properly so called. There was a decision to that effect. So will it matter? Is it the deputy, something happens to the deputy that the ticket is affected, or shall we say the main man who is the governor that something happens to and then it has an implication for the joint ticket? So let's get your opinion, not as a security man.
Kingsley, you can't drag me into this country. Not at all. I'm here wearing a black beret, and you could see my signal here, clearly showing I'm here as a man on the black and blue. And so you can't draw me into the wig and gown arena. And honestly, it's an interesting thing, both from the practical point of view and as well as the academic point of view. But again, as much as I will engage in a very healthy debate on a matter like this out of the studio, as a first spokesperson, I'm here talking security. And I will stay on the line talking security.
Take him on security issues.
The issue Kingsley has raised actually has brought to the fore some of the discrepancies in the justice system in this country. And it's a matter for another day, though. But then, from what you've said, it shows that there's inconsistency in terms of judgments concerning elections and what have you, who is qualified or who should be disqualified and all that. And it's affecting the electoral system because INEC is not comfortable with all of this. We drag one thing for a very long time when, of course, the truth will still come out to be INEC's original decision. That makes it, look a lot funny to me and many other Nigerians. Now, let's turn to Frank Mba on security matters now. Yeah, you have given us a lowdown, of what has happened with respect to intelligence gathering as well as the preparedness of your men for these two elections. Well, you've been doing that before. Now, a successful election is a crime-free election. But in Nigeria, we know that even with your preparedness, we still have some electoral vices, vote buying, which of course is the latest, and ballot box snatching and what have you. And the strategy that the police have used in the past is that, of course, the policemen that will be at the polling units are not armed. Of course, then perhaps a few meters away, in this case, maybe there are the armed ones, who will, of course, look out for any group of persons who would like to come and disrupt the election and what have you. Now, are you satisfied with the build-up to this election with respect to the activities of course, the thugs? Because a few days ago, the SDP governorship candidate in Kogi State reported to the world, via social media, showing the secretariat that was burnt down in Kogi State. If that is true, and we have a few days to the election, are you satisfied that you will be able to cope with what will be on ground on that day?
The truth about elections is, no matter what INEC does, no matter the details, no matter how detailed INEC preparations and implementation strategies are, no matter also how detailed the police preparations and that of all other law enforcement agents are, there is a critical role that politicians and political parties play. And I just hope that Nigerians will continue to intensify their interrogation of the activities of politicians. I don't want to make a general statement that politicians sometimes like to play the spoiler roles in the peaceful conduct of elections. But politicians, a lot of politicians tend to actually operate as if they are always moving moving diametrically opposite the direction that INEC or the security agencies are moving. But the truth again is, that's why we are here. That's what we are paid to curtail. That's what we are paid to checkmate. We've seen challenges in Kogi. We've also seen challenges in Bayelsa. But like I've said repeatedly, we have the capacity to deliver on our mandate. We have the capacity to ensure that we beat these politicians into line. We have the capacity to ensure that things are properly done. We have this advantage of the fact that this is an off-cycle election. And so we have the luxury of manpower. We have the luxury of enough sufficient and adequate patrol vehicles. So we will deploy this massively. And some of these areas that are of concern to citizens, some of these areas that you've also noted, we've blocked those leakages, and we're assuring Nigerians that come 16th November, these elections will come and go peacefully in these two states. We'll put adequate measures in place to checkmate these activities, and we will get them checkmated.
There are things that we read, lately. I don't know whether that is right or not, but you are here to perhaps confirm it. Is any directive, to shoot thugs who are armed. Because the allegation is so big. You know, the allegation is that, look, you can see thugs, you see them armed. Is it interesting to do that? Because if the allegation is true, how then can people, feel safe to go out to vote when, especially in Kogi State, for instance, where the allegation was made by, of course, the SDP?
If you are a security person and you cite someone who is armed, you have to. The operation is a simple operation. You are charged by law to disarm the armed person, the person who is lawfully armed. And in doing so, you are expected to use an amount of force that is legitimate and necessary in those circumstances to disarm the person. Okay. And if you try to disarm the person peacefully, and you see that doing so will put the life of the people around him or your own life in danger, you could proceed to do so otherwise. So if I approach you, Kingsley, on the road tomorrow and you are unlawfully armed and I try to disarm you peacefully and you try to unleash violence on me, I will unleash a greater violence that is necessary to arrest Kingsley and disarm Kingsley.
I'm only armed with my pen.
I don't know if Kingsley will change. I don't know if Kingsley will change.
Whether he has been hired.
I don't know the roles he's planning to play.
All right, this will be about. Thank you very much. But let's return to Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu. One of the points that you made earlier, I found it very interesting in terms of the behavior of the political actors. To state it simply is to say, look, rig wherever and whenever you can, win the election, and then let your opponents go to court. Yes. Now, can we theorize, therefore, from that, look, election litigation cost time and sometimes uncertainty of outcome is actually now fueling electoral malpractices? Yes. And if that's necessarily so, what could be the antidote?
Well, I find it really interesting, and oftentimes I'm perplexed because of what we get from our judiciary. Somebody goes to the tribunal, and the person is said to have lost the election. The person goes to appeal court, and the person is declared the winner. Then you have similar case in another state. Then reverse is the case. So when you have these two conflicting precedents, a lot of persons can cash in on those precedents to pursue their cases, and then that becomes incentive for the rigging of elections and the theory we are talking about. The antidote is for the judiciary to be able to sit back to say, well, how can we enhance the process by supporting what INEC is doing, by making sure that we don't encourage, because if you look at it critically, the police has reformed tremendously to the extent that nobody is beginning to say police are used to stuff the ballot as it used to be before that they will usually allege. INEC too has substantially reformed itself from within. So the only link, which is the most important link, is the judiciary. But I've not seen that after elections, the way INEC does, the way the police are doing now, the judiciary will call themselves together to review, to say, okay, what has worked, what has not worked, how are our decisions undermining the reforms that we are beginning to enjoy. They've never done that. If they've done that, it is not in public domain, and anything that is not reported doesn't happen. So the only way forward is for INEC, the police, and the judiciary to meet on a table to say, how do we enhance the process, so that INEC will now be able, like the cases he has cited, the Zamfara case, consistently Previously, they would have said INEC is siding with the ruling party. But this case was against the ruling party. INEC has the guts to say, look, you do not have candidates for this election because the processes leading to fielding of a candidate was not really followed. So that ends the case. But again, the court, giving conflicting judgment, said it must be on the ballot. There is one issue that Barrister Ozzy did not raise. For instance, 2 days to an election or 3 days to an election, when the ballot paper is supposed to be ready, it is that 2 days to election that INEC is expecting a judgment that will say put candidate A on the ballot 2 days to election. And when that affects the distribution of ballot paper, which is the most critical component of the electoral process, now INEC is blamed for delays, for not being able to get its logistics right, and nobody was going to blame the judiciary for putting INEC in that mess. So it is high time these parties met to really look at the roles they are playing as actors within the electoral system to see how we can enhance the system.
Yeah, and then, Kieran, that's particularly crucial. Abu Hamisu, thanks a lot. Where you have courts of coordinated jurisdiction giving conflicting judgments, such as INEC is faced with. Osaze Ozie has given us some of those instances, and I think it's a very valid proposition.
It is a valid. It is. Yeah. You know, all the while, whenever we have a topic that relates to the issue of justice and the law of the land, and that, I've always been so skeptical about so many things concerning the laws of the land and how the laws are interpreted in our law courts. There are so many loopholes or lacunas, if you like, that people cash in on and use it during the electoral process. See how they can grab power. It has continued. So the issue of the judiciary process is something that we'll have to revisit if you ask laymen like me.
Yeah, and remain lay for this one. Let me just no, just hold on, because I mean your point is noted and is valid. I mean, Osaze Ozie will also confirm that it isn't just the issue of courts of coordinated jurisdiction giving conflicting decisions on matters that are virtually on all fours, that are virtually similar. But you also have, I mean, with the greatest respect to the lordships, an attack now on the core principle of our legal system, which is stare decisis. That is the rule of precedent. I mean, courts that are higher than you or the hierarchy have given a decision on this matter, which you ought to, as a lower court, follow. But it looks like, I don't know, Abu Hamisu, that's a good point.
Okay, let's go to Uzi again. Mr. Uzi, yes, you are ready for this election from all indications and from what you have submitted this morning. But I'd like you to look at the likely challenges. You have usually a challenge of card reader, failing at a point, and card readers are failing to capture someone who is eligible to vote, and what happens to that person, and knowing the characteristics of the persons in the two states we're talking about. Historically speaking, of course, we've had that some persons would like to cause trouble even at the polling unit. So how are you prepared to handle that? And again, the issue of failure of the card reader to operate in the first place. You usually have generating cells, at the polling stations and what have you. Have you taken care of those challenges, or if there are more, really, let us know if there are other challenges you're expecting and how you are going to tackle it on the day of election.
Yes, there are quite a number of challenges, and if I may just put in a quick word, first of all, on this issue of court judgments. They are very impactful, and Dr. Hamisu has made reference to one. I didn't have time to expatiate on that, and he's quite right. And they have security challenges. Because for now, there's apprehension in Bayelsa State. Is APC on the ballot or not? If they're not on the ballot, what will their more radical supporters do on that day? Already, obviously not everything that he knows, we know that will be in the public domain, but intelligence gathering is one of the most important tools being used to fight crime and electoral violence. And things are going on the ground. Some people may try to disrupt things. The attitude of, if I don't have it, nobody should have it kind of a thing. Or cause some mayhem, confusion, try to get the thing. People have called for postponement in both states, by the way, for different reasons, so that we can sort ourselves out. That will not happen. We're going ahead to try and prepare. Out of the 14 line items we have outlined in the timetable and schedule of activities released 6 months ago, 13 of them have been completed. It's just election that is remaining. So we're going to face the election day challenges now, and they are very serious challenges. Card readers, we've gotten the best of our card readers in our stock and sent them to the 2 states, charged them fully, deployed them already. Those card readers have been deployed. But I can't sit down here and say it's 100%. For now, normal temperature and pressure, in these conditions, they've all functionally be tested and retested, and they still will be tested in the rack centers on the night on the eve of the election. But you know, like your phone, sometimes it just has a mind of its own. So I cannot sit down here. It will not be fair of me to say, but for now, all the candidates we do have, and there are technical crews on ground with mobility provided on election day. So that if any candidate malfunctions, within a short time, they should be there to replace if it needs replacement. If it doesn't need replacement, they will reconfigure and see what they can do with the card reader to ensure they function. But if the card reader, the card reader will always read your card and say whether it's a genuine in a card or not. It may not always read your biometrics because for whatever reasons, your biometrics were not as the aperture was as wide, whatever reasons. But that will not prevent any genuine voter from being allowed to vote because your photograph will be there and your photograph was also on the register of voters. So you will not be prevented from doing so. The technical team will be around to troubleshoot and ensure that things go smoothly. But no, there will not be generators in the polling units. There are generators in the rack centers and in the collation centers. But there are several redundancies, several spare card readers that will be brought in case of malfunction on that day. Some work for a while and then start malfunctioning, in which case we'll try to replace. But if for any reason nothing can be done, we have to postpone the election in that particular polling unit. If after all we have done, nothing happens. That's the plan C, the last plan what we have.
All right, gentlemen, very interesting conversation we're having here on the elections due in about 48 hours in both Bayelsa and Kogi states that are choosing next governors. We'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll take tweets that have come in also from our viewers and then return to our guests.
Meet the dreamer. Meet the stylish. Meet the bold. Meet the inquisitive. Meet the warrior. Meet the master. Meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Unity Challenge. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
Hold it! Me, I don't comot my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn serve? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me, I not do again Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
General, don't move!
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria for today. And of course, as Kingsley earlier announced, we have a torrent of tweets from Nigerians who are watching this edition of the program. And of course, these are their contributions. We'll begin with Festus Akimboewa. He says the political parties and people of Bayelsa and the Kogi states must put the interests of their states at heart by shunning violence and other electoral malpractices. All the politicians involved in the elections must put the safety of human lives above their own political ambition.
Abbas Abubakar's tweets, let the people decide and let it be free, fair and credible election. Our security agencies should ensure that they create a peaceful environment for voting.
All right, from Comrade Alaji Ngala, INEC is expected to conduct free and fair, credible election in the two states, and all the contestants are expected to accept the outcome of the election in good faith.
Let me take this from Amabola Humbab. The voter on their party must vote their conscience. They should not give in to vote by desperate politicians. They should know that whatever amount they collect now is their own dividend of democracy for the next 4 years. Vote, not fight.
All right, Aziz Bolanle, the journey of another 4 years lies in the hands of Kogites and the Bayelsans. Well, they should go out en masse and vote for the best candidates in their respective states, wishing the two states hitch-free election.
Abdul, security agencies must be up and doing. We must not allow a few miscreants to hijack and portray our country in bad light. We must let these shameless politicians know that there is rule of law and where there is no one above the law.
Delejak Solomon, there are already warning signals in the two states. Both are politically volatile at the moment. What are the security agencies doing about identified flashpoints in Bayelsa and Kogi states? They must expedite action to ensure safety of lives and property during Saturday's election.
Law Alpha said security agencies should be on red alert. They should not take sides but be patriotic. It is possible to record free and fair elections in both states.
Utulo Sunday, the electorate should vote wisely and never sell their conscience for money that would not better their lives. The politicians, however, should know that the election is not a war front. Our security personnel on the alert should remain non-political or apolitical.
Apolitical, yeah. But Amasi Haruna Adamo tweets, I'm urging voters in both states to vote for the best, as the hope of building Kogi and Bayelsa lies with them. And also the electoral umpire and security agencies should do justice.
Motana Farouk, election ought to have been a civil social interaction where everyone would be proud and happy to participate. But these days, election is gradually becoming a game of political enemy. I don't know what that means, which creates a potential fear instead of joy in the minds of many. We must have to be ethical.
Abdul again says the looting of state treasury is one of the reasons we have do-or-die politics. The National Assembly should enact a law banning any candidate whose agents or supporters are believed to be involved in thuggery and violent activities. That way sanity will be restored. He said whose agents are believed. So that's very subjective.
But National Assembly members are the politicians as well. So how can they not make the law against themselves?
Are you suggesting that? Are you suggesting that they are the ones who sometimes...
No, I said, no, he was talking about National Assembly members who are also politicians. He wants them to make law against politicians, so the possibility may not be there. All right. So Muhammad Yamida said, I wish both states free, fair, and credible election.
Okay, so those are the tweets that we can accommodate in the meantime. Let's return to our guest. DCP Frank Umba. What will be the regulation with regards to restriction of movement, if any, or a lockdown in both states? Kogi is very critical. Everybody knows that.
Okay. As an aside, let me just make a few comments on the discussions that both Dr. Hamisu and Osazi were had on the issue of litigations. Part of my own recommendation, if moving forward, is that since we have understood clearly the antics of our politicians, perhaps we'll also be looking at a reform that will mandate, once you rig an election, you are declared a winner because you rigged, and then it turns out, probably up to Supreme Court, that you actually lost the election. Because one of the things they do is that, this litigation can span up to even 3 years. Yes. Even when you declare them, even at the end of the day, after the judiciary might have sacked them, they have enjoyed power for 3.5 years. We must come up with a policy or a reform that will compel them to return every emolument they've collected. I want to believe that will also be a strong disincentive, because you will think twice. If at the time you are sacked, every single salary, every single allowance, every even if you've gone on medicals on the bill of the state, you will be compelled to return and refund every single money every single benefit you took as a legislator, as a member of the executive. Perhaps because we need to just come up with something very, very strong to dissuade them, a very strong disincentive. These litigations, like you also say, have a lot of them have got profound effect on security arrangements. They create tensions. Beyond the tensions, by law or by regulation, we're also required to provide security for every of these candidates. Once you emerge as a gubernatorial candidate for a political party, we are expected to provide you with security. So after you have configured all your security arrangement on the basis of an administrative decision that INEC has taken, then 24 hours before election, you are called upon to begin to recognize somebody as a gubernatorial candidate, and you have to reconfigure your security arrangement all over. So we must continue to work together to deepen these reforms and block all those areas, advance the remedies, and suppress those mischiefs that those politicians are actually advancing.
I'm sure, sorry, let me jump in here before you take my question. The point you just raised about either regurgitation or restitution of benefits that a person had taken on account of election that the person didn't win. There was a court decision with regard to that, a member of the National Assembly from Benue.
Yes, I've seen it, but he's not consistent, just like you said.
Yeah, but has
not been consistent.
That's part of the gaps that we have in reportage. Has he actually regurgitated what the court directed him to regurgitate? Because he was supposed to have refunded all the salaries and allowances and emoluments that he got in that particular process. So that could be a pointer.
There are at least 3 cases where the Supreme Court have asked the people to refund money. But you have to ask the National Assembly whether they have done so or not. So we cannot answer that.
All right.
Okay, back to the issue of restriction of movement. It's actually some of these decisions we have to take them in national interest, in the interest of public safety, in the interest of public health, in the interest of our democracy and collective well-being. But I know that the restrictions that we're announcing, particularly concerning Kogi State, will have some negative impacts on the economy. But again, it's for a very short time. But certainly there will be restriction of movement, starting from the midnight of the election day. So the election is taking place on the 16th, for example.
Midnight of Friday.
I don't know whether you'll be calling it midnight of Friday or midnight of Saturday now, because once it's midnight, it becomes 16th. So from midnight, giving birth to 16th of November, all borders around the 2 states will be closed. A total lockdown. And from that midnight till 4 p.m. of Saturday, there will be no movement.
Vehicular movement, that is.
Vehicular movement. Internally within the state, there will also be restriction of movements from that same time to 4 p.m. on the day of election. We assume that by 4 p.m., most of the critical elements of the election might have been concluded. We understand, we know, because we're all Nigerians, Kogi State occupies a very peculiar geographical landscape. It is not just a transit point for most travelers commuting between Abuja, the southeast, the southwest, and other parts of the north central. But Kogi also has got land borders with about 9 other states. And if you add the Federal Capital Territory, then you will say it has land border with 10 states. That is an advantage in normal time, but that's a big security challenge in electioneering period, especially in an off-cycle election where you will now have all other states idle hands, idle politicians who can be easily mobilized to cross the borders. So we'll be seriously enforcing the restriction of movement, particularly between those neighboring states into and out of Kogi, starting from the midnight of Saturday.
Frank, stated, given the fact that those elections will have to be held under a very peaceful, atmosphere. Now, considering Kogi, for instance, bordering 9 or 10 other states, that's including FCT, have you really thought it wise to address or rather talk to those concerned, the people in the transportation industry who are going to be hit by this lockdown that you talked about? Is there any channel through which you have communicated what you've just said to them to start their preparations in good time? And again, talking about those lazy hands, as you pointed out, that could...
I said idle hands.
Idle hands, okay. Idle hands who could infiltrate, Kogi and the Bayelsa state. They could as well do that a day before, a day before the election as well. Are you taking that into
those border posts? Those border posts, I'm using the word border posts loosely here, are already being monitored. But the critical period is those election period. And so you can't place this kind of restriction for too long. And that's again why we moved it up to 12 midnight. We could have as well made it earlier, probably 10 p.m., 9 p.m., or even 6 p.m. But because we are taking into cognizance the impact it will have on the economy, the impact it will have on so many other social activities, we decided to put it as far as 12 midnight. But as I speak to you, those areas are being monitored. Remember, I've told you that there are some persons that have already been tagged in the intelligence community, and these persons are being monitored. These persons are being followed. Their activities are being streamed live down to force headquarters. So we are keeping a tab on the possible trouble spots and likely troublesome persons.
Now, I asked about your communication respect to
yes. We intend today to also have meeting with some of the major transporters. It is not possible for us to have meetings with everybody, but we're also taking advantage of the social media. We are taking advantage of platforms like this that you are providing for us. As I'm leaving this program, I have multiple radio programs today. The Deputy Commissioner of Police in charge of operations, DIG Abdulmajid Ali, will also be addressing the media today in Lokoja, and he will be speaking much more in details concerning police preparations and some of these things as they relate to Kogi and Bayelsa election. So we will keep talking, we will keep pushing out communication. We are glad that today information, there's a jet age. We are glad that we can take advantage of the social media. We are glad that in a deregulated age, we have lots of television houses, lots of radio stations, with lots of newspapers, and we'll be taking advantage of all these platforms.
I had to ask this question because police may see itself battling with election, and of course people who are commuting from commuters from the 10 different states.
It's pretty unfortunate that we continue to have these lockdowns in the course of elections, even for the off-cycle elections, Osun, Ekiti, Anambra, Edo, and all of that. I was just wondering, I mean, it looks late now for this particular exercise. couldn't there be a special dispensation for major arteries? You say, for instance, major arteries that you can effectively police. To say Abuja, Abaji, Lokoja, Okene, Auchi Road, yes, that is clear. And then you also take Ajaokuta, Geregu, straight on for those who are going to the east, and Kaba, and then major arteries. And in that case, I mean, without trying to prescribe for the law enforcement agencies, you proliferate your officers along these major arteries, rather than having this lockdown for 16 hours or more, and then by the time you have the backlog of vehicles coming. But of course, again, I think the security officers would have made their own assessment, and then, of course, in their best judgment, this is what we're going to be faced with. There will be a lockdown, as has been indicated. But I just was going to ask this question. In the past, election observers and election monitors had talked about militarization of elections. Are we going to have military presence also in the elections on Saturday, Bayelsa and Kogi?
For me, the lead agency for providing security for these elections remains the Nigerian police force. Of course, we'll be having support from other sister agencies, the customs, the immigration, the correction services, the civil defense, the Federal Road Safety Corps, NDLE, and the rest of them. They will all be playing supportive roles in the provision of security for these elections. We also expect that the military might also be conducting exercises, probably out the outer space, perhaps at the exit points to the states, patrolling the highways. But traditionally, we don't expect the military to be around the inner circle of the elections, the polling booths area, the collation centers areas. We don't expect them to play those roles, but we also expect them to be at the outer layer and provide general security, conduct patrols that will serve more like that will have deterrent values, and then generally support the other law enforcement agencies. But essentially, the bulk of the job relating to the provision of security around these elections will be conducted by the police.
Now that there will be sister agencies that will be providing some level of assistance to you, are we being guaranteed of less or zero interagency disputes or misunderstandings during elections? We've had such experience.
We've never had issues working with other sister security agencies supporting us for these elections, and we've conducted several of these elections. We've never had problem with the customs, with migrations, with civil defense. We've always worked harmoniously to advance the interests of our democracy, and I see that playing out itself again in this election.
All right. Thank you very much, DCP Frank Oba. Dr. Abu Hamisu, this is not to be cynical, but despite the best preparations by INEC, despite the best preparations by the security agencies, if the security agencies were indeed to police every square inch of both Bayelsa and Kogi states, you can actually, make a safe bet that there will be disturbances by some hotheads in some locations, which always raises the issue, either disturbances or infraction of the electoral law, see and buy, for instance, and all of that. But the question has always been with diligent prosecution of those offenders whenever they are picked up. We hear that a few arrests are made, and after that, nothing appears to be in the public domain by way of reportage. Maybe the cases are going on in court. What do you think can be done, to bring in this aspect of deterrence so that people know that, look, election is not a day or a time or a season for misbehavior, without punishment?
Yeah. Well, I would say basically we need to do two things. We've always harp on what the police will do to provide security. What police will do to provide security. And police officers are not magicians. They are not magicians in the sense that they need information from the communities for them to be able to act. Where you have a situation whereby the entire community is working in concert to keep mute and protect those persons that are unleashing mayhem on them, how do you expect police to act? Now, this is critical to the successes of what the police or security agencies will be able to do. He is talking about they're using intelligence to gather information and to act. Then when you have people that are not willing to volunteer information, that becomes very difficult. But we're beginning to see a change in trend where the people are saying we will not allow people to subvert our own interest by undermining the choices we are making through inducement using cash. And that has led to arrest. What I will suggest is the observers that usually go there to observe these elections could at least add that to what they need to do in order to say it's not enough to make recommendations that will blame INEC, for instance, make recommendations that will blame the security agencies or the political parties, but in fact assisting those people that are crying out loud to say we don't want our choices to be undermined, to secure their victory for them by adding to the list of their to do after the election, following through, because this is what we've been doing in the civil society before I left for other assignments. After we've documented what needed to be done, we follow up with the security agencies as well as INEC. If the prosecution is supposed to be done by Attorney General of the Federation, it means Attorney General of the Federation office should be added as a critical stakeholder that will be engaged post-election, so that those that have been arrested will ensure that they are duly prosecuted and that will be able to assist as a deterrent.
Yes, Dr. Hamisu, really time is on our side, but I want to hear just one or two from Mr. Uzi. Do we have confidence, in the men that we have in the field to execute this election?
Well, we get our ad hoc staff. There are only 16,000 permanent staff of the commission. That includes drivers, security men, and everything else. So the bulk of our people we use are from the NYC. Everybody knows that in terms of polling unit activities, either the NYC or federal tertiary institutions. Then the collation officers will come from federal tertiary institutions, in this case outside of the respective states. We think these are the greatest bulk of generally non-partisan people that we can use. We don't want to be accused of taking lists from political parties or politicians or candidates.
Okay.
So yes, we have confidence in that.
Thank you. At this point, we'll have to round off this particular edition of Good Morning Nigeria. Very interesting conversation that we've had, and I would like to thank our guests for making it possible. Oluole Osaze Uzi, Director Publicity and Voter Education, INEC. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Frank Mba, Public Relations Officer and Deputy Commissioner of Police, Nigerian Police Force. It's been great talking to you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We wish you well in your undertakings. And again, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, a political scientist. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, now we take sports.
The Super Eagles came back from a goal down to beat neighbours Benin Republic 2-1 in their 2021 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying match day 1 fixture at the Akwa Ibom International Stadium, Uyo, on Wednesday night. Lille of France forward Victor Osimhen and Samuel Kalu were on target for the Super Eagles in the game, while Stéphane Sessegnon got Benin's only goal. The Squirrels stunned their hosts when captain of the side Sessegnon put the ball into the net in the second minute. Alex Iwobi came close to getting the equaliser for the home team in the 14th minute, but his left-footed shot was well saved by Fabian